Hey, Deserve listeners, we're coming up on our 14th anniversary show in 2022. On September 17 and 18, we'll be live streaming for 7 hours on each day, adding up to 14 hours. And if you want to send us a card or a package or something that will open during the live show, you can send it to Postmail Box 214-10002. That's 3 zeros, 10002. Aurora Avenue North, number 36, Seattle, Washington, 98133. Let's watch the show.
If somebody's toxic in your life, you are removed from my life. I'm benching you. When you do the work and you get better, maybe I'll bring you back into my starting five. But right now, you're benched. Email me.
All right, so I haven't been reacting to everything that's been happening because it's not very interesting to me. It's basically just two guys, John, who's Patrick's brother, and Jibri going after each other on stage, off stage. Jibri actually said he wasn't going to go back on the show if John was on stage, so John stayed behind. And they were both insulting each other. John is calling Jibri Sparkles, and Jibri called John trailer trash, called, I think, Patrick trailer trash. Yeah, so Kara actually said, how do you feel about Jibri calling you trailer trash? And Jibri's like, well, they are trailer trash. They're from the trailers, and da-da-da-da. And Patrick is just kind of staying out of it, which I think is a good idea. There's a mandate to some extent with toxic masculinity, and to some extent just in our society. When you live in an honor-based society, or you have that within you, when someone calls you out, you have an obligation to fight back verbally or physically. It's illogical. It usually results in more harm than good. You know, maybe a little bit of sparring vocally would be like, hey, pal, calm down. But most of the time, it's just two people humiliating themselves, really. And John was escalating kind of, but not as much as Jibri. I mean, Jibri just cannot let it go. And at first I thought, well, Jibri is coming on the show looking for a fight. It kind of looked that way, right? He thought he would go after Ariella and then now John. At first I thought that he just seemed to want to create some drama on the show. But as time goes on, and especially as he escalates here, it lends itself to the hypothesis that I was talking about last week, in that he seems to have a schema around people limiting his dreams, right? People who get in the way of him achieving the greatness that he thinks he deserves to achieve or is capable of achieving. There seems to be a history there, right? Particularly with his mom, it seems, that manifested not only with his mom, but also with Miona, saying that Miona gets in the way of his band, that kind of thing. And we could imagine a history there with Jibri, where he's growing up and maybe he was being bullied. We don't know, but he kind of mentioned, he hinted at it, right? That in the beginning of the season, he talked about how being in his community where there aren't many non-white people, he just decided people were looking at him all the time, so he just leaned into it and decided to dress in a noticeable way. And he's just, he owned it. It's a way of reacting. Now, of course, that's a good coping, but why are we as a society forcing black and brown people to somehow cope with the fact that white people are constantly looking at them as the other and staring at them, or being suspicious, or flat out oppressing and harming the person through prejudice and racism? So he might have gone through some bullying in addition and has some trauma around that. And John, I don't know, this is very speculative. John could be reminding Jibri of certain individuals that would bully him due to his race or due to something else, especially calling him out for his clothing, calling him Sparkles, this kind of thing. Who knows? Because at first he seemed, as he's going after Ariella, when Jibri was going after Ariella, he seemed relatively calm and somewhat calculating. He was making a choice. But as things escalate, I think he's having a fight or flight reaction. You can kind of hear it in his voice. He's more intense. He doesn't seem to be doing okay. And we also see him, so we have two people on the stage right there who are easily displaced upon for him. If the mom was bringing him down, he struggles with that his whole life. And again, it's very speculative, but I wouldn't be surprised if while Jibri was growing up, he was being bullied, and one of the ways that he decided to cope with that was that he was going to be great. And maybe he even did achieve greatness in some respect as a child. He got some recognition of just like, okay, finally, I've now overcome the bullies by outshining them in this way. This is my way to self-esteem. This is my avenue. And all of us have this. All of us have this. And it's an interesting question to contemplate. Like for me, for example, all of us struggle with, to some degree, low self-esteem. Pretty significant. I would say the most confident child is 50% insecure. You know what I mean? So I remember being a kid and feeling shy or unsure about myself. And there was this one moment, there were two moments in my life where I shined. I found that I was, I have 3 siblings, so there's a little bit of competition, but not a lot. But when I could outshine my older siblings, like that was a big deal because they were 7 years older than me. It's just like they were always better than me at everything. And if I could somehow manage to be better than them. And so there were these 2 moments. One was we were sitting at the dinner table and I would have been, 6, 7. And I was super into astronomy. For the first number of years of my life, I was planning on becoming an astronomer. And then I found out that in order to get a job in astronomy, you have to wait for someone to retire or die as a professor. And I was like, well, that doesn't sound very nice. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll just have astronomy be a hobby. But this is before I realized that. And I'm reading all these astronomy books in the 70s and didn't know a lot, but knew more than the average person, it's Carl Sagan. Somehow it came up, or I brought it up or something, that I said that sometimes Pluto is inside the orbit of Neptune. Am I boring you yet? Anyway, so I was saying that, and my brother pounced. I remember at the dinner table, he pounced, and we had this very 70s white dinner table, circular. And anyway, we're sitting there, and my brother says, no, Pluto is the 9th planet. It's never the 8th planet. He's probably 13 or 14, so being snotty with me. And I was just, in my mind, I was just like, oh my God, I have a book that I could go get and disprove him. And everyone in my family will see that I bested my older brother. And so I push away from the table, I run upstairs, I grab I think it was like a Time Life book, a series, and one of them was on the universe, and there were other books on like animals, and it's kind of like an encyclopedia kind of thing. And I grabbed it and I bust it out, slap it down on the dinner table. Neptune inside of or Pluto inside Neptune's orbit. There it is, right there in the book. There's no denying it. And my brother just had to be like, oh. Now I'm guessing the rest of my family completely forgot about that incident. Like, it's just the amount of talking that goes on in my family. For me, though, that moment was self-defining, really, because I worked at it. It wasn't like I just randomly knew this fact. Like, I had been studying in my aimless way. This is pre-internet, and no one in my life was into astronomy. I didn't know anyone. I had no teacher. I was literally the only person. I just thought it was me and Carl Sagan, essentially. I studied it. I learned, there were like 2 books I could find. There was one that we had at home, that universe book, and there's also a book in the library. The point is that we all have those moments. Maybe you can think about one of those moments for you and comment below. Let me know. I'd be curious. Because for me, what that told me was that I could shine. I could have some self-esteem, some self-worth, some role in life in knowing things. If I know things and can explain them, impart them to others, then that is something that maybe I'm better than other people. Maybe I'm better than my brother in that way. Now, there's a chance I wasn't and am not better, but I thought I was better. And so that was a seed that grew into eventually becoming a therapist, which is kind of along those lines, but of course being a professor and a podcaster, YouTuber, it's absolutely in line with all that stuff, knowing things and imparting them in a way that other people can appreciate or something, right? But there's a shadow side to that, in that if I am ever found, or I think other people see me as, or I see myself as, someone that doesn't know things, or doesn't know how to impart things, or irresponsibly communicate something, then that is devastating to me. Whereas to someone else, they might be like, well, I don't care. It's sort of like for me in cooking. I don't have any pride in cooking. I'm not good at it at all. I've tried to get into it. I always just seem to mess it up somehow. And, now I don't think I couldn't learn it. I guess I could, but I don't have a drive the way I do for this YouTube channel, So anyway, there's a shadow side and there's a light side. So the light side for Jibri is that he is a good musician, he's entertaining, he's charismatic. The dark side is that when people get in his way, or he perceives it that way, or he's not shining in the way that he wants to, or people don't think he's shining in a good way, or they think he's being thirsty or something. I don't know what his shadow side is. I don't even know if this is an issue for him. You could see that double-edged sword there for him, both sides of the coin, if you will. He seems to be going after John and Ariella because it's possible that he sees them, because he's seen the show, right? They seem to have seen some of the show, as people who are bringing down someone in their life, right? John is bringing down Patrick. Ariella is bringing down Biniam. And especially Ariella and Biniam, he seems to map his life onto their life pretty easily, and is highly targeting of them, and also highly preferential towards Biniam and Patrick. I didn't show those scenes, but Jibri seems like instantly bonded with Patrick and Biniam. And Biniam and Patrick seem to just be like, oh, okay, well, cool, I don't know you, kind of a thing. So there's that. But I also say that Jibri and John were starting to threaten each other with violence. It didn't come to that, which is good. Mainly, I think John was pulling back. I mean, he wasn't helping, but John was mainly just like, he just seemed uncomfortable, and he was trying to verbally spar, but he didn't seem to be wanting to do it. Jibri seemed to want to do it. He seemed to want to perpetuate it, get into it with him. It's just, I don't know. If you saw the show, you saw their back and forth, and it's just so silly, right? Like, okay, so let's map this out. Jibri and John get into a physical altercation, and Jibri wins, quote unquote, by knocking him out or getting John to give in and say, I give up, or something. What in the world does that prove? Nothing. It proves nothing. Or it just proves negative things about Jibri, that he's a bully, that he's violent, that he's a criminal. I mean, to go after someone like that, physically assault someone or threaten someone, get in someone's face. Now, I'm guessing that John would have invited it if Jibri had started it or something. But anyway, so it's just bizarre, really. And when you are around that sort of thing, you just think, why are we doing this? Like, so many problems in interpersonal relationships derive from this honor culture thing. And then, of course, when you zoom out to countries, nations, to societies, to political parties, this is what's happening. They insulted me, and we have to insult them back. And it's like, can we not be stupid? Can we think logically? Can you think, what is the greater good here? The thing that, and I've seen enough Reddit videos along these lines, that when you get into a physical altercation, there's a risk that you could actually kill yourself or the other person, or seriously maim someone. It's not like the movies where you punch someone and, they get unconscious and then half hour later they wake up with a bump on their head. You could cause brain damage. Again, you could kill someone. You could go to jail. There's all sorts of, Jibri was in a coma, for crying out loud. So, and I've been there, as a dude, as a guy, I've been there countless times in my life. Not so much in my adult life, but sometimes. But definitely when I was younger, it was all the time. And we just got to get out of that. So when I see that, it makes me sad that we're still like that. It's like,
I'm gonna stand up for, when I see that, it does make me mad. Like, if you're gonna be a bully, well, let me bully you and see how it feels.
Right, that was the other thing I was gonna say, was that his accusations of John are actually much more applicable to Jibri. He's saying, like, John is a bully, and it's like Jibri is the bully of the show. He's going after people unfairly, and yelling at them, threatening them, getting them off the show. I mean, he literally managed to get John off the show. I mean, if that isn't bullying, I don't know what is. All right, well, if you haven't become a patron of the podcast yet, you can do so now by clicking the link below or going to patreon.com. When you become a patron of the podcast, that really shows us that you like what we're doing and support what we're doing. I wouldn't be able to do any of this if it weren't for patrons. Thank you, everyone who has become a patron, especially you annual upper tier patrons. That's the sort of nicest thing you can do, if you can afford it, of course, and if you want to. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.